Let's meet James Caan. Now, James Caan really needs no introduction. If you've ever watched Dragon's Den, without doubt, he was the most popular dragon on Dragon's Den. Would you just give a brief synopsis of your business experience so that we can understand how you can speak with such authority about buying a business?
Thank you, Jonathan. So my background is I started my career in the recruitment business. So like a lot of entrepreneurs, I set up a small recruitment business, a broom cupboard in Pall Mall. There was me, the yellow pages, the desk, and the valuable telephone. And I had a vision to build a global human capital business. The business I founded and created was a business called Alexander Man. And today, Alexander Man is the world's #1 talent solutions provider, employs 7,500 people in 27 countries with revenues of just over 950 million. So for me, it was an incredible journey that I thoroughly enjoyed, and it created the business that I'm today extremely proud of. I sold that business in 2005 to a private equity firm. And from the capital that I generated, I created my own sort of family office, effectively taking that capital to acquire and build another business. Because Alexander Man was my baby, it was a startup, it took 17 years to go from kind of zero to exit. And now that I'm a little bit older, a bit more grey hair, I didn't want to put another 17 years. So the strategy kind of second time round was what we call buy and build. So buy existing businesses to achieve scale. And the two lessons that I learned, Jonathan, was that I found quite unusual. It's something you wouldn't normally expect. But if you're looking to build a business to exit, what I found is there are more buyers, the bigger the business is, than there are for small businesses. And the reason is because private equity firms spend a huge amount of time and effort in raising capital. And when they've raised money, they generally raise anywhere between 500 to a billion. So for them, it takes just as long to do a 20 million deal than it does a 50 million deal. And the amount of time and effort they take to do that, plus because they have this huge pool of capital, they are charged with deploying it. So doing small deals is quite inefficient for them. So one of the things that I saw was if I was to build scale, I would get a higher premium because it's safety in numbers and people are less nervous when you're buying a boutique business. But also you get a bit more competition for the business and therefore you get a bit of a premium. So the last business I sold, I got 8.6 times earnings, and that was primarily because I had acquired that business on 1.8 million EBIT, which I paid 5.5 times income for, and I exited that on an 11.4 million EBIT at 8.6 times. And what I did, the gap between the 1.8 and the 11.4 was I effectively bought acquisitions where I identified complementary businesses in the market, in the sector, and was able to effectively add to create scale. And then when I had, over £10 million worth of profit, when we eventually did sell, I sold to a UK private equity firm called Graphite Capital. But the good news is I had 3 buyers who were interested in the deal, and the initial offer started at 7.5 times earnings, and we closed at 8.6. So my background effectively is kind of owner, manager, entrepreneur, then effectively became an investor to buy businesses to scale. That's a whistle top of my background, Jonathan.
It's a great introduction, and it's very relevant to what people here want to know more about. And I think that sometimes business owners can be stuck in a small business for so long, and it becomes so frustrating. They never get that scale because they are acquiring one customer today, another one tomorrow, and it's very, very frustrating. Where if you can go and buy £800,000 of revenue, another £1 million of revenue, you just speed up the process. Buying a business is just so rewarding. And I put together a free training showing you exactly how I do it. If you look in the video description below this video, there is a link. You click the link, you're taken through to the training, watch the training, and I'll show you exactly how to buy a business successfully. So when it comes to funding acquisitions, there is a misconception that you need to put everything on the line to buy a business. In fact, sometimes people almost encourage this belief that you must remortgage your house. You must put your life savings into the deal. Could you talk for a little bit about financing deals without risking your entire personal financial life at the same time?
I've never, what we call in the trade, bet the farm on an acquisition, meaning I haven't put my entire wealth on the line to acquire a business. So typically what I've found and I think each sector has its own nuances and its own characteristics. But in the sector that I operated in, which was effectively professional services and the recruitment sector, the first thing I learned was, number one, you don't have to buy 100% to the company. So when you're looking at acquisitions, my starting position was never that I need 100%. And actually, as a policy, I never acquired 100% because I want the business to succeed. And when I acquire that business, I want the founders of the acquiring business to be aligned with me. So my model was, I ideally, and every deal is different, but my kind of ideal model was I wanted to buy 2/3 and I wanted the existing owners to retain 1/3. So that, of course, immediately brings your acquisition price down quite considerably. Secondly, if the business that I'm currently running today is profitable and the business that I'm acquiring is profitable, what the banks are always interested in is how do you service a loan? So the combination of the two profit streams of your business and the acquiring business gives you an ability to service debt. And typically my model, what I had agreed with the bank, which was HSBC, was they would lend me typically 2 times the combined EBIT of the business that we were going to create. So if you just make up the numbers for the sake of it, if my business was making $500,000 profit and I was going to acquire a business that was going to make $500,000, the combination of the two is $1 million. Therefore, the serviceability of the debt, what I had was £1 million to service the debt. And if the business I was acquiring, for the sake of argument, was making $500,000, that means, and if I was going to typically pay anywhere between 4 to 5.5 times earnings, depending on the size, the scale, the profitability, there's a lot of variables, but just take 4 as a simple number, then effectively 4 times 500 is 2 million. I've already got an agreed facility with HSBC, which is 2 times. So I've got $1 million of debt to do that deal. Bearing in mind, I'm only buying 2/3. Therefore, I don't actually need 2 million. I only need 1.3, of which I've got $1 million of debt anyway. What I then found was when I acquire a business, a lot of businesses in recruitment have outstanding receivables. So outstanding where they are owed money. And one of the things that I learned was not every business that I bought had an invoice discounting facility. And some of the businesses were effectively funding their own receivables. So I could then use the invoice discounting method by taking their receivables to borrow against the receivables as well. So if, for the sake of argument, my debt was $1 million, and depending on what size of their receivables were, I could generally draw anywhere between 100 to 200 against the receivables, meaning that all I would need effectively is like 100,000 of what you call equity in order to do the deal. So I think the funding was a mixture for A, not buying 100% and therefore limited the amount of money that I needed, B, agree with the bank, the debt facility, and C, use the existing business that I'm acquiring because I earn more than 51% and therefore I can consolidate it and leverage the receivables of that business in order to make the acquisition. So as Jonathan rightly said, when making the acquisition, I could effectively acquire a business making 500,000 EBIT, where my outlay, probably from an equity perspective, would be anywhere between 100 and 200,000 pounds, depending on each transaction.
When buying a business, you need a great lawyer on your team. So why not use mine? His name is John Andrews, and his details are on the screen. When we talked before, we chatted about a £12 million acquisition that you did in this fashion. Could you explain a little bit about that one, please?
I had just sold Alexander Mann, and I wanted effectively to do it again, but this time around not organic, but what we call buy and build. And the one Jonathan's referring to was my kind of first foray back into the market. So I identified a business that was making 1.8 million profit. I valued the business at between 5.5 and 6 times earnings, got to an agreed valuation of 12 million. We bought roughly 2/3 of that, which meant we roughly spent 8 million. And the thing that I hadn't quite realized until we did due diligence, this was a business that had been going for nearly 20 years and had always been fairly cash positive, and therefore the owners had never looked to borrow money, and they funded the business through profitability. Because of the nature of the business, it had a very large contract business, which they funded themselves, but it had an outstanding receivable balance when we acquired the business of nearly 10 million. And when we were looking to do the debt financing, the bank had offered us 85% of the invoice discounting. So what I found staggering was I acquired the business, 2/3 of it, and because we were more than 51%, we had control. So we effectively parted with the 8 million. And then within 3 months of acquiring the business, we did a refinancing of the debt book and effectively released the entire 8.5 million. And effectively, when we put the money in at the 8 million, we put it in as a loan into the company, refinanced the debtor book, repaid the loan back to ourselves, and therefore the acquisition effectively cost us zero. We then spent the next 6 years adding to that business, and we made 6 acquisitions and effectively got it to just over 11 million profit. And when we sold that, we sold it for just under 100 million and repaid back the loans that we'd borrowed. But what we had done is a lot of the surplus cash that we were generating, we used that to pay back some of the debt. Because obviously when you sell a business, the model is it's enterprise value less debt. So whatever debt exists in the business comes off the purchase price. And therefore, I'm always keen to reduce the debt as I go along, because at the end, when I sell, I obviously want to maximize on the return to shareholders.